Yeah, so just I think no one's really come back on so far. Hi, Sudhir Sharma. Thanks for being here, Ajat. Thank you, guys. So I'm just going to again wait for a couple of minutes before I finally talk about the last three judgments that I want to discuss before ending this talk, and then we can call it a day. But essentially, I want to thank all the people who are here because this is really the worst way of spending your Saturday evening on a boring talk like this. But thank you all for making it and for being here. And of course, so Janvi has asked me to tell all of you if there are any questions, please post them in the comments, and after this talk is done, we'll try to answer them to the best of our abilities. Thank you for being here. Yeah, so now I'll pick it up from where I left. I want to now talk about, after having explained what I believe should be the definition of place of arbitration in the context of in the manner in which it's been used in Section 20 of the Act, that it should mean different for different things for domestic arbitration and international commercial arbitrations. I just want to talk about how other judgments in the wake of BALCO have interpreted these terms and have interpreted BALCO itself, and just want to underscore the confusion that BALCO has really caused. But before I do that, I just want to add one more point to what I was saying before I cut off the live stream. And that is that there is a problem, in my opinion at least, and very humble opinion, not to mean any disrespect to a judgment delivered by any court in the country. I feel that an interpretation clause or a definition clause, in a statute cannot be reverse interpreted using another provision of that statute. I believe definitions are provided in statutes in order to interpret the remaining provisions of the statute and the statute as a whole. So I believe that insofar as BALCO interprets or widens the scope of Section 21E in light of Section 20 or Section 31 of the Arbitration Act, and says that the parties have an autonomy of choosing seat, and that autonomy for some reason applies to domestic arbitration as well, I believe that's not a sound approach. I believe 21E will remain the way it is, and there is a reason why the legislature has kept 21E the way it has kept it. And the remaining provisions of the Arbitration Act actually have to be read in light of 21E and not the other way around. Moreover, you can't read 21E in light of principles of international arbitration without fully scrutinizing and examining whether those principles are applicable to domestic arbitration in the first place. So having said that, I would now want to discuss a case called Indus Mobile Distribution Private Limited versus Datawind Innovations Private Limited and others. So in this case, the main issue before the Supreme Court was, when the seat of arbitration is designated as Mumbai, whether an exclusive jurisdiction clause stating that the courts at Mumbai alone will have jurisdiction in respect of disputes arising under the agreement would oust all other courts. Now, the brief facts of the case are as follows. Now, there was a party situated in Amritsar, Punjab, and it was supplying goods to the appellant in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, and those goods were routed or were going through or were being dispatched from New Delhi. The arbitration agreement between the parties provided for both an exclusive jurisdiction clause and a place of arbitration. Now, both the exclusive jurisdiction clause and a place of arbitration, which is the seat of arbitration, both pointed towards Mumbai. So Mumbai was the exclusive court to exercise jurisdiction over the arbitration proceedings, and also was the seat of the arbitration. So disputes arose between the parties, and the Amritsar party, the Punjab party, filed two applications before the Delhi High Court. One was under Section 9 of the Arbitration Act, and the other was under Section 11 of the Arbitration Act. Now, both the applications were allowed by the Delhi High Court, holding, firstly, that no cause of action arose in Mumbai, and therefore only the courts of Delhi, Chennai or Amritsar could have jurisdiction over the dispute, and secondly, that an exclusive jurisdiction clause will not apply since the courts in Mumbai would have no jurisdiction in the matter. Now, this is a very traditional approach. This is the approach that was put forward by Hakam Singh and all the judgments that followed Hakam Singh. And then there are various other judgments which have come after BALCO, which have also followed this approach. So this is what the Delhi High Court decided. Now the matter goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, while disposing the matter, states that the Delhi High Court will have no jurisdiction and that Mumbai courts alone will have jurisdiction to the exclusion of all other courts, as the judicial seat, the juridical seat of arbitration is in Mumbai. And the court also says that the moment a seat is determined, it is akin to an exclusive jurisdiction clause for the purposes of regulating arbitral proceedings arising out of an agreement between the parties. So this is a case which, after Balco, says that a seat designation amounts to an exclusive jurisdiction clause, and for all practical purpose ends up saying that the moment you designate a seat, it ousts the jurisdiction of all other courts in toto. However, there was a slight twist to this matter, because Mumbai happened to be the court of the seat, and it also happened to be the court designated in the exclusive jurisdiction clause. So my analysis of this judgment is as follows. Now, this judgment has relied on para 96 and paras 98 to 100 and para 123 of Balco. Now, all of these paras in Balco are really disconnected, they're discordant. Because as I said earlier, the example at para 96 doesn't really add up to what the rest of the judgment says, and moreover, the remaining paras which I'm talking about, especially para 123, all of these paras cite international authorities. They cite authorities which are relevant to international commercial arbitration, not really to domestic arbitration. Moreover, I believe that at this stage, the court should really have gone into the question of whether para 96 to 98 of Balco constitute its ratio decidendi. I'm not saying that the court was bound to proceed with some sort of conviction that it doesn't form a part of the ratio decidendi, but I feel that an inquiry in this regard would have been much appreciated and would have been helpful at this juncture. Now, the court also doesn't inquire at all into how domestic arbitration really encapsulates and assimilates the concept of seat and how seat is relevant to domestic arbitrations. I've discussed this before from a logical and a legal standpoint, how the concept of seat has really no role to play in a domestic arbitration, so the court doesn't look into those questions. Now, the judgment in Indus, interestingly, can also be called per incurium, because the bench strength in this judgment was the same as the bench that delivered Hakam Singh. So now Hakam Singh is a precedent that's already been laid down by the Supreme Court. It has not been overruled. And then comes along this judgment, which completely defies Hakam Singh and doesn't really address whether Hakam Singh was per incurium or sub silentio, or it gives no reason at all to digress from the law that had been laid down in Hakam Singh. So it can be called per incurium that way. Technically, they could not have gone against Hakam Singh. Now, again, very interestingly, the court in Indus Mobile seems to have assumed that the CPC has no application to the Arbitration Act. And this becomes evident from the following lines in para 20 of the judgment. And these lines are, I'm just going to be reading them out. Quote, under the law of arbitration, unlike the Code of Civil Procedure, which applies to suits filed in courts. So they're essentially saying that the CPC has zero application to the Arbitration Act. And I think that that doesn't really stack up when we read the bare text of section 21E. The court seems to have drawn a distinction between the CPC and the law of arbitration to underscore that in arbitration law, jurisdiction can be conferred solely by designation of a seat, and you don't really need to rely on the CPC at all. But in deciding so, and in saying so, the court really doesn't analyze or concern itself with the fact that Section 21E or Section 20 of the Arbitration Act, and wherever the idea of a seat has been imported into the Arbitration Act, these are primarily the sections from which the idea of seat was introduced into domestic arbitration by Balco. None of these provisions really have a non-obstant clause. They don't oust the jurisdiction, or they don't oust the operation of the CPC. There is nothing in these sections to say, notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, or notwithstanding anything contained in the CPC. That's simply not there in the Arbitration Act. Moreover, there is no proviso in the CPC, especially from section 15 to section 21, which says that the application or the operation of these sections will be subject to what is written in the Arbitration Act, and that these sections will become defunct the moment a seat court is designated, a seat is designated in an arbitration, and the CPC will simply stop applying. So all of those things don't really exist. So I just believe that while delivering this judgment, the court really has not given much, paid much attention to the intent of the legislature. The court has also overlooked the fact that the 2015 amendment, which comes post Balco, Balco is a 2012 judgment, the 2015 amendment obviously comes after Balco. does not introduce the words seat or venue in Part 1 of the 1996 Act. The legislature has chosen to continue with the word place of arbitration. There can be multiple reasons for it. I'm not saying that my understanding of the non-incorporation of the word seat or venue in the Arbitration Act mean A and not B. But I'm just saying that that is something that the court should have taken into account, that there is inaction on the side of the legislature to actually incorporate in those many words what Balco had laid down. Another very apparent flaw in the Indus judgment is that it places incomplete reliance on the case of swastik gases. Swastik gases is a case that follows completely, as I said, to the T, the Hakam Singh principle. So what Indus does is, it selectively follows what swastik gases said and conveniently removes the second part of what was said in the judgment and comes to the conclusion that seat courts are akin to exclusive jurisdiction clauses. So the part of swastik gases that is actually quoted by Indus is the following. It is well settled that where more than one court has jurisdiction, it is open for parties to exclude all other courts. For an exhaustive analysis of case law, see Swastik Gas Private Limited versus Indian Oil Corporation. But in doing so, the court completely forgets that Swastik Gases says where there are multiple courts competent to exercise jurisdiction under the CBC. So you can't arbitrarily choose between courts and confer seat status to one of them and say that this will now be the court of exclusive jurisdiction while excluding and ousting all other courts. So that is something that Indus doesn't really go into. So that's my analysis of Indus. We now move on to another judgment of the Delhi High Court, which is Antrix versus Devas. And this, in a lot of ways, was an attempt to rationalize Balco and Indus Mobile. So Indus Mobile says that a seat designation amounts to an exclusive jurisdiction clause, whereas para 96 of Balco talks about concurrent jurisdiction, and the judgment itself ends with saying that seat confers exclusive jurisdiction upon a court. So the whole situation is quite confusing. It's not a straightforward answer to how seat actually operates within the domestic context. So the facts of Antrix versus Devas are as follows. Antrix Antrix Corporation had its registered office in Bangalore, and Devas Multimedia also had its registered office in Bangalore, and they entered into an agreement in Bangalore which was unilaterally terminated by Antrix. So the agreement provided for settlement of disputes by arbitration, and Devas accordingly approached the International Chamber of Commerce with a request for arbitration, an RFA, against Antrix Corp. Though Antrix Corp nominated its arbitrator under the agreement and even filed an application before the Supreme Court under Section 11 of the Arbitration Act seeking constitution of an arbitral tribunal, the ICC went ahead and constituted its own tribunal and commenced with the arbitration. Aggrieved by this, Antrix approached the Bangalore City Civil Court with an application under Section 9 seeking an anti-arbitration injunction against Devas to prevent the tribunal from initiating proceedings. In response to this, Devas enters appearance before the Bangalore City Civil Court and says that we need time to file our objections. Now, in the interim, what happened was that the ICC tribunal rendered its award against Antrix Corp. And subsequently, Devas filed an application under Section 9 of the 1996 Act before the Delhi High Court for interim relief. And thereafter, Antrix applied under Section 34 of the 1996 Act to the Bangalore City Civil Court, seeking to set aside the award passed by the tribunal. Now, it was these proceedings under Section 34 of the Arbitration Act that were challenged before the Delhi High Court, contending that the Bangalore court did not have jurisdiction to entertain Antrix Corp's application under Section 34 of the 1996 Act. The DHC framed its primary issue in the matter as such. If appeal is maintainable, does this court have exclusive jurisdiction to adjudicate any application arising out of the arbitration agreement between Antrix and Devas? Now, it really boiled down to which of these courts, because quite a mess had been created, multiple applications flying around here and there, an ICC tribunal in the fray, a Bangalore City Civil Court, Delhi, and so on. So it was down to the court to decide how exactly and which court will have jurisdiction in the present matter. So the court actually veered in favor of concurrent jurisdiction and went on to say that Balco and Indus have to be read in harmony with each other. And they said that the court actually went against what Indus said, but had a justification for doing so. And the justification is not the strongest in my opinion. They say that the reason why Mumbai ended up being the competent court in Indus is because the exclusive jurisdiction clause vested exclusive jurisdiction upon the courts of Mumbai, and in addition to that, the court also happened to be the seat court. In all other situations, there will be concurrent jurisdiction. So there will be subject matter jurisdiction, and there will be jurisdiction arising from the fact that a court is designated as the seat. There are interpretational issues in Antrix, which according to me are bound to arise because the precedent that this judgment is following, or the precedent rather that this judgment is trying to rationalize, is itself very confusing. So in para 58 of Antrix, the Delhi High Court has acknowledged that the law laid down in Swastik Gases and Hakam Singh has correctly stated that it is only upon one of the multiple competent forums that parties in exercise of their autonomy can confer jurisdiction, and also that mere designation as a seat of one particular court would not amount to vesting of exclusive jurisdiction. However, there is one fatal flaw in this reasoning, which is Antrix has accepted Balco's and Indus's assumption that the seat of arbitration in domestic arbitrations enjoys jurisdiction akin to natural jurisdiction. So they're saying that the court to exercise jurisdiction over an arbitration will be a court which is competent to exercise that jurisdiction. But they're not deriving that competence only from the CPC. They're also saying that a court which derives its competence by virtue of being designated as a seat is equally natural and is equally competent as a court which derives its legitimacy or competence from the CPC. And that, I believe, is a fatal flaw. Had the court looked into the application and the relevance of the idea of seat in domestic arbitration, or maybe had it considered whether para 96 to 97 or 98 of Balco form part of its ratio decidendi, I believe that the court could have probably delivered a judgment that would have withstood the test of time. This judgment did not, by the way, because it was overruled soon thereafter by a judgment called BGS Soma. It was NHPC versus BGS Soma, and this was a judgment of the Supreme Court, which went ahead and set aside the Antrix versus Devas judgment and said that its view is pedantic and it is untenable in the eyes of law. So I'll just briefly be taking you through the facts of BGS Soma, which are as follows. NHPC Limited had executed a contract with BGS Soma, wherein the arbitration agreement or the arbitration clause provided that arbitration proceedings shall be held at New Delhi / Faridabad. Now that's very confusing because it doesn't really specify what New Delhi and Faridabad exactly are. Are they just venues? Are they the seat of the arbitration? What exactly did the parties intend Delhi and Faridabad to be? So naturally, from such a confusing language, conflicts had to arise. There were disputes between the parties and arbitration proceedings were commenced. The proceedings were conducted in their entirety in New Delhi, and the resulting award was also passed in New Delhi, signed in New Delhi, everything. The award was in favor of BGS Soma. NHPC sought to set aside the award by way of a Section 34 before the district court in Faridabad. Thereafter, BGS Soma files an application under Order 7 Rule 10 of the CPC, read with Section 21E1 of the 1996 Act, and seeks to get the matter transferred from Faridabad to either New Delhi or to Assam, saying that New Delhi being the seat has jurisdiction and Assam is where the cause of action arose. The district judge finds merit in BGS Soma's application and then transfers the application from Faridabad to New Delhi. NHPC appeals under Section 37 of the Arbitration Act against this transfer. That in itself was a question in this case, whether 37 can actually entail an appeal on grounds of a wrongful transfer of the matter, but that's not relevant to this discussion. The Punjab and Haryana High Court held that the appropriate forum for NHPC's Section 34 application was Faridabad, because the cause of action had arisen there, and that that New Delhi was only a convenient venue of the arbitration rather than being its seat. So BGS Soma challenged this order of the Delhi High Court, of the Punjab High Court before the Supreme Court. So among the issues that were framed by the Supreme Court in this matter, there were many issues that were framed. The one that is relevant to this discussion is whether the designation of a place of arbitration confers upon the courts of that place exclusive jurisdiction to decide disputes emanating from the arbitration agreement. Now, the court held that para 96 of Balco must be read holistically and with the rest of the judgment, and could not be read as a standalone dictum. This is something that the court says, while not explaining how para 96 can actually be reconciled with the rest of what is written in Balco's judgment. So the court observes that Balco inter alia relied upon the English judgment of Roger Shashua and others versus Mukesh Sharma, which had decided that courts of the seat of arbitration shall possess exclusive jurisdiction over proceedings arising out of the arbitration. The court also held that Antrix's reading of para 96 of Balco was incorrect and pedantic. Now, what the court essentially has done in BGS Soma is, in my humble opinion, it has furthered an untested belief, a belief the veracity of which, or a notion the veracity of which, has not really been tested properly. It's never really been looked into at its root. So the court has relied on the same, throughout the judgment, the court has relied on the same authorities which were relied upon in Balco, but without appreciating that these authorities are all, again, given in an international context. No explanation as to how these authorities will start applying suddenly to domestic arbitration, which is fundamentally and intrinsically different from international commercial arbitration. Para 40 of BGS Soma is actually very interesting because it says in para 40 that para 96 of Balco, when read with para 75, 76, 110, 116, 123 and 194, leads to the conclusion that the selection of seat amounts to an exclusive jurisdiction clause. Now, it's worth pointing out here that all of these paras are entirely discordant. Para 96 has this entirely India-centric example which has nothing to do with international commercial arbitration. It talks about concurrent jurisdiction, whereas these remaining paras that BGS Soma is relying upon all rely on foreign authorities, all rely on authorities on international commercial arbitration, and do not really speak about concurrent jurisdiction. They talk about exclusive jurisdiction being vested in the seat courts. So there's really no match or kind of harmony between the sections that have been cited by BGS Soma. The biggest shortcoming, in my opinion, of BGS Soma is that it neglects legislative intent in reaching the conclusion that it does. So the court notes that section 21E, when read with section 20 and section 31.4, is unclear in as much as section 21E does not accord itself with the remaining two sections, because of which the law had to be developed by judicial interpretation. So the court here is acknowledging that 21E does not really match with what Balco's interpretation of section 20 and section 31 is, and therefore 21E had to be altered and modified by judicial interpretation. So here is an acknowledgement of the fact that the legislature has not really read into section 21 or has not included into section 21E what the courts are reading into section 21E. As per the court's reasoning, this perceived disharmony between the sections arose because the legislature incorporated section 20 and 31.4 from the Unicitral Model Law in the 1996 Act. And while the legislature did so, 21E did not really undergo any sort of change. 21E remained old, it remained the same section as existed in the 1940 Act. It didn't really undergo a change, and therefore there is a perceived disharmony between the two sections. Thereafter, the court tries to harmonize and widen the meaning of court under the 1996 Act. The court in para 40 of BGS Soma acknowledges that, and I'm quoting here, the Balco judgment, when read as a whole, applies the concept of seat as laid down by English judgments and which is in section 20 of the Arbitration Act by harmoniously construing section 20 with section 21E so as to broaden the definition of court and bring within its ken courts of the seat of arbitration. Again, an acknowledgement that 21E has been broadened purely by judicial interpretation and not by legislative action or intent. Actually, intent is something that we can talk more about because the court has interpreted legislative intent in a manner which I don't think is appropriate. That's again my humble opinion. Now, it's worth pointing out that from 2012 onwards, which is the year when Balco came, the legislature had multiple opportunities to actually give legislative effect to what Balco was saying and finally include the words seat and venue in section 20 and maybe change the definition of section 21E so that the courts wouldn't have to read anything further into it. And after 2012, the 2015 amendment came, the 2019 amendment came, a law commission report came before the 2015 amendment, and there was nothing at all that the legislature did to give effect to Balco. In fact, it undid Balco's ratio by saying that part 1 and part 2 of the Arbitration Act are not watertight. There are certain provisions of part 1 which can very well apply to arbitrations and awards covered under part 2. So I don't really see how the legislature has followed BALCO in any manner whatsoever. But there is an explanation that BGS Soma gives for this inaction, and this explanation is as follows. It says this inaction by the legislature is an unequivocal acceptance of BALCO's interpretation of the definition of court. And for this, the court also relies on Indus Mobile. I'm quoting here what the court exactly said. They said, the amended act does not, however, contain the aforesaid amendments, presumably being the operative word here, because the BALCO judgment in no uncertain terms has referred to place as juridical seat for the purpose of section 2.2 of the act. It further made it clear that section 21 and 20 subsection 1 and 20 subsection 2, where the word place is used, refers to juridical seat, whereas in section 23, 20 subsection 3, the word place is equivalent to venue. This being the settled law, it was found unnecessary to expressly incorporate what the constitutional bench of the Supreme Court had already done by way of construction of the act. I don't think that it can be that convenient for a court or the legislature. This kind of inaction, or inaction of this magnitude, or inaction which can lead to such possible confusion where the Delhi High Court has actually given what the Supreme Court believes to be a wrong judgment and a pedantic view of the BALCO judgment, I really don't think that the legislature would simply sit silent on something like this. I think inaction here has to carry some more meaning, or meaning other than what the Supreme Court is ascribing to it in this situation. In my opinion, inaction in this case can mean a rejection of what BALCO was trying to do. And in a way, the legislature has rejected what BALCO said about the watertight distinction. So there is rejection on the one hand and there is inaction on the other. And that inaction, in my opinion, cannot always lead to be acceptance. So I'm not saying I'm right. I'm simply saying that this inaction equals refusal aspect of the legislature's actions should have been looked into by the court, could have been looked into by the court for a more holistic, complete analysis. So the argument that non-incorporation of BALCO's interpretation must be considered, in my opinion, a rejection of the same. And this gains further credence when seen in light of the fact that the legislature, again, as I said earlier, did not add a non-obstant clause to section 2.1(e)(1) to save it from the operation of the CPC or exempt it from the application of the CPC, nor was any change incorporated from section 15 to 21 of the CPC. The legislature also does not change the substance of 2.1(e) when they clearly had the option to do that. The moment they change the language of section 2.1(e) and the core definition of court, all of these differences can very well be sorted out, and they can very well be harmonized, and there will be no more need for the Supreme Court to be interpreting the law the way they are interpreting it. But the legislature chooses not to do that. The court has not only interpreted what the legislature did not do, they have also gone ahead and interpreted what the legislature did do. So BGS Soma ascribes a very interesting meaning to the bifurcation that was introduced in section 2.1(e) by the 2015 amendment, which made high courts the only courts for the purposes of international commercial arbitration, even though a high court may not really have original jurisdiction to try those suits. So BGS Soma says that if this hypothetical distinction can be created, and if the high courts can be given jurisdiction which they don't possess, or which is not ascribed to them by the CPC, then the same hypothetical situation by analogy can be extended to the seat court to grant the seat court exclusive jurisdiction. Now this again, this explanation might sound compelling, it might sound right, where there is a departure, a clear departure is evident from the side of the legislature, but this incorporation and this change was introduced to the Arbitration Act following a Law Commission report. And that Law Commission report, for a very specific reason, had recommended that high courts alone should be the courts to exercise supervisory jurisdiction over international commercial arbitrations. And the explanation goes like this. The reasoning, which was forwarded by the Law Commission, was to ensure that international commercial arbitrations involving foreign parties, will be heard expeditiously and by commercially oriented judges at the high court level. And such an amendment was considered important, not just for providing confidence to foreign investors, but to mitigate the risk faced by the Government of India from claims by foreign investors under the relevant investment treaty negotiated by the Government of India with other countries. And this recommendation, for this reason, was incorporated in the 2015 amendment. It was not supposed to be a way to bypass the CPC. So I believe that the court, while interpreting the purport, the intent of the amendment to Section 21E, which was introduced by the 2015 Amendment Act, has thrown to the wind this explanation that was given by the Law Commission for proposing such a change. So selective consideration, really, in my opinion. The court in BGS Soma recognized that there is an inherent contradiction within para 96 of BALCO insofar as it states that two courts are supposed to have jurisdiction. One is the seat court and one is the court that has subject matter jurisdiction arising from the CPC. So the court comes up with a solution to that. They say that para 96 is actually the ratio of BALCO. However, there are the last few lines, the last 3 lines or 4 lines of that paragraph are obiter and must be removed, and para 96 must be read without those last 4 lines, and then everything will get harmonized. The lines that BGS Soma are talking about are the following. The lines are, in such circumstances, both the courts will have jurisdiction. That is, the courts within whose jurisdiction the subject matter of the suit is situated, and the courts within the jurisdiction of which the dispute resolution, that is arbitration, is located. So the court says it is right to remove these lines from para 96 to harmonize the judgment with the rest of its contents. I believe this again is an approach which is somehow aimed at saving and upholding BALCO. And I really don't think that the Supreme Court, there was an alternative to this. If the Supreme Court can go so far as to say that certain lines of this para are not supposed to be the ratio, the Supreme Court could very well have examined the possibility that para 96 wholly is not the ratio of BALCO and could have read BALCO without para 96, and that would have done a better job of harmonizing BALCO with itself before it gets harmonized with the judgments that came after it and the judgments that preceded it. So somehow for some reason the court does not do that. It upholds BALCO, it calls Antrix wrong, it calls Indus correct, it says that seat is akin to exclusive jurisdiction. Once seat court is designated, no other court has jurisdiction, and the concept of seat squarely does apply to domestic arbitration within India. And that's a judgment upholding BALCO. However, very recently, there has been a judgment, it's Quipo Construction Equipment Limited versus Janardhan Nirman Private Limited. It's a 2020 judgment, very recent judgment of the Supreme Court, which has at least raised, in my opinion, the right question. So it said the following in para 22. It says, the specification of place of arbitration, place meaning seat, may have special significance in an international commercial arbitration where the place of arbitration may determine which curial law would apply. However, in the present case, the applicable substantive law as well as curial law will be the same. So the court says where the curial law and the applicable substantive law are the same, what exactly is a seat designation adding to domestic arbitration? What is it doing to domestic arbitration? And this is not a judgment that can overrule all the judgments that I've cited above. It can't go against BALCO. It can't undo the establishment of seat in domestic arbitration that has been done by this line of judgments. But at least it raises an inquiry in the right direction. And I really hope that in future, courts do take this up more seriously, and even if they don't oust the idea of seat from domestic arbitration, I just hope it's incorporated better into the framework of domestic arbitration. And I hope that there are the various questions that exist with regard to the relevance of seat in domestic arbitration are addressed adequately, so that questions such as the ones that I have spoken about today are put to rest once and for all. And that will be the entirety of my talk. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sparing time to be here. So glad that all of you could join in. A huge shout out to Janvi for having me here and bringing me on. And I had personally a lot of fun giving this talk. And again, my condolences to all of you who wasted 2 hours of your time on a Saturday to attend this. But I hope, I really hope if there's been some sort of insight that you've been able to gain into the idea of the operation of seat in domestic arbitration, I would consider my job done. And with that, thank you. I'd end it here. And if there are any questions, and I'm sure there would be questions in the comment section, I try to answer them in text, in writing, as soon as possible and to the best of my abilities. So thank you so much. And this is me signing off. Bye-bye.